Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Alicia. I am a mum of 4 beautiful kiddos, and if you clicked on this video, you will know that I am sharing a little bit of a vulnerable video today. It is all of the controversial things that I do as a parent that most people won't agree with. And let's be real, parenting isn't always about following all of the rules, and I definitely don't fit into that category. I am sharing all of the things that I do that other people probably wouldn't agree with. You know them things that will have people looking at me like, wait, what? And it's what works best for our family. I am just a person that doesn't really care what other people think about my parenting. I really couldn't care less. I know that my children are happy and healthy, and this video is all of the things that I do that I think would be controversial to other parents, but do remember that these are just my own opinions and it's what works for my family. It's definitely not a one size fits all kind of thing. So let's get started and jump in to the 10 things that I do that are extremely controversial in the parenting world. Let's get straight into it, and the first one is definitely going to cause a stir, but I really don't care if my kids have a full-blown dramatic screaming meltdown in public. Like seriously, I do not care. You know those moments where your kid's on the floor in the middle of the grocery store, kicking, wailing, and every single person suddenly forgets all of their own life problems because watching a toddler lose their mind is apparently the most fascinating thing ever. The judgmental side eyes, the dramatic sighs, the old lady that whispers, back in my day we wouldn't have tolerated this. Do you know what? I actually do not care. I'm so unbothered, I'm so unflustered, I'm so not embarrassed, and I'm definitely not about to start panicking just because some stranger in aisle 4 thinks that my child's feelings are an inconvenience. Crying kids do not mean bad parenting, and a lot of parents freak out when their kid starts melting down in public because we have been conditioned to think that a crying child equals a failing parent, and that if our child isn't perfectly composed at all times, we are doing something wrong. That is a lie. Kids are not mini adults, their brains are still developing, their emotions are huge, and their impulse control is pretty much non-existent. And if anything, meltdowns actually mean that they're learning to process those emotions. So it's not something that I am going to punish or shut down just because it makes other people uncomfortable. When my child is losing it in the middle of the grocery store, my first thought is definitely not, oh no, people are watching, or how do I make this stop, or even, gosh, what if they all think I'm a really bad parent? I could not care less what anyone else is thinking. I don't even notice other people. My first thought is always, what do I need to do to help my child feel better? I let them feel their feelings, and instead of shushing them or bribing them with snacks or even getting them in a headlock and running them outside, instead I immediately get to their level. I will label their emotions and validate them. I can see that you're feeling upset, and then I will help them through it like any other person would. And I don't understand why everyone feels the need to stare in public. I feel like there is a thing where children's emotions are inconvenient, and it's so untrue. They are such a learning experience, and I am not raising people-pleasing robots. Some people think that kids should be quiet, obedient, perfectly composed at all times. I am not raising a robot. I am raising a human being, and humans need to feel their emotions, and they also need to know how to cope with them, and that it's safe to do so even in public. And does it make other people uncomfortable? Maybe. Do I care? Not even slightly, because the alternative is teaching my kids that emotions are something to be hidden or suppressed, and that is not a lesson that I'm ever passing down. Okay, number 2 is one that I know is going to ruffle some feathers, but I don't enforce strict bedtimes for my older kids. I just don't. I know that before anyone starts clutching their pearls, yes, I understand that sleep is important, and I'm not out here advocating for sleep deprivation or saying that kids should be running wild at 2 a.m. Not at all. But here's the thing, forcing a child into a bedtime at a certain time, no matter what, doesn't guarantee quality sleep. And if anything, it just guarantees a battle. We absolutely do need a bedtime routine. There's a cozy wind down, maybe some reading. We might talk about the day, but when it comes to forcing them into bed at a specific time, I don't do it unless they actually need to sleep. And guess what? it works. Because let's be real, have you ever tried to make a fully awake, not tired at all kid go to sleep? Because it's like wrestling a caffeinated squirrel. They honestly toss, turn, they suddenly need to ask you these deep psychological questions, and they start recounting their entire childhood, and it's a whole thing, and for what? They're still awake, and now you're both frustrated. So instead of fighting a losing battle, I do something radical. I trust them. I listen to them, and I know that they know their bodies. I guide them to understand when they need their rest, and that doesn't mean that it's a total free-for-all. My kids know the importance of sleep, and they've learned through experiences that if they push their limits a bit too far, they'll feel rubbish the next morning. And here's the kicker. I don't save them from that. I don't coddle them when they're overtired or when they're struggling the next day. That's their lesson to learn. And they do. Natural consequences, I feel, are the best teacher. People act like kids can't handle this level of responsibility, but guess what? I think they can. They are entirely capable of understanding how their own choices affect them. And the best part, by allowing them to figure it out now, they're developing self-regulation skills that will serve them for life. And I know that the traditional approach says that kids must be sent to bed at the exact same time every single night, no exceptions. But let's think about that for a second. If an adult forced you into bed at a specific time every single day, even when you weren't remotely tired, you're going to be annoyed, right? You'd toss and you'd turn and you'd stare at the ceiling, and you'd probably feel super irritated rather than relaxed. Why would we assume that kids are any different? Letting kids have some kind of control over their sleep has actually reduced the bedtime struggles in our house. There's no arguing, no more power struggles, there's trust and respect, and a whole lot more peace. And look, I get it. I know that this isn't going to sit well with everyone, and some people swear by strict bedtimes, and that's totally fine. But for us, a little flexibility, a little trust, and a little letting go has made all the difference. And it is worth mentioning, though, that I do enforce a strict bedtime for my younger children, as I do believe that they would stay up all night if they could. Even, if they were tired, I think that they haven't been given the opportunity yet, and their brains aren't fully developed to be able to recognise and prioritise sleep signals. So I do force bedtimes for the younger children, but for my older children, I'm really free with it. Okay, let's move on to number 3, which is probably another controversial one. We don't do reward charts or punishments. And this is one of those things that when I was first starting out as a parent, I thought it might be a good idea. I mean, it sounds great, right? The idea of having motivated kids, it's a star on a chart, doing something really good, or some kind of consequence for bad behaviour. But over time, I've come to realise that that really doesn't work for us. At least it's not the way in the sense that it's typically framed. So for one thing, I don't want my kids to be externally motivated all the time. I want them to do the right thing because they know it's right, not because they're hoping for a sticker or a prize at the end of it. And what I really want for them is to be internally motivated. So we've ditched the reward systems in favour of teaching them all about their personalities and their responsibilities, and letting them learn through natural consequences. So here's an example. Say my son forgets to take out the rubbish. Instead of giving him a consequence like no screen time for you, or a sticker chart on his, taking a sticker off of his chart, I'll say something like, hey, the trash didn't get taken out and that's part of your chore. So now it's going to pile up and make a mess. So what can we do about it? The key is not to use it as a moment for punishment, but instead a teaching moment where we talk through the problem and find a way to correct it. He doesn't need a reward to know that it's his responsibility, and he doesn't need to be punished when it goes wrong. The consequence is built into life, and when you do something that has a natural effect, children will learn from that natural consequence. And I think that sometimes we get into a cycle of rewarding kids for everything, and it sets up this idea that they need a prize just to do the basic things in their daily routine. For example, you don't need a reward every single time you brush your teeth, right? It's just part of taking care of yourself. So I really try to emphasise that behaviour, and that it should come from within, not for what you get out of it. And that said, I totally understand why some people use reward charts and punishments. It works for some families, and that's okay if it helps your kids to stay motivated or keeps them on track. more power to you. But for us, I found that shifting the focus away from rewards and punishments and more to accountability and self-awareness, it works so much better. And when my kids understand the why behind their actions and the natural consequences that follow, I feel like they're then learning lessons that are more valuable in the long run. And the best part, I don't have to keep track of stars and rewards and money. They don't have to always worry about earning something to feel really good when they've done something. Okay, number 3 is because I said so parenting. And you know that classic phrase that we grew up hearing from our parents, because I said so. Now, I don't know about you, but that phrase has never quite sat right with me when I was younger, and I always felt that it was a way to shut down my questions without really explaining. So when I became a mum, I decided that I didn't want to raise my kids like that. Don't get me wrong, there's been definitely times where I have said because I said so, especially when I've been at the end of my tether or when things are just sheer carnage. But for the most part, I always try to explain my reasoning. And I really believe that I want our kids to understand the world around them and to grow up to make their own informed decisions. And I have to give them that context and respect their curiosity. So here's how it might play out in real life. For example, say my son doesn't want to clean his room. Instead of saying, go and clean your room because I said so, I'll say, well, let's talk about that. I'll explain why it matters. I might say something like keeping your room clean helps you to stay organised. It gives you space to play, to focus on your homework without distractions. And I've found that when I explain the why behind my rules, they are so much more likely to get on board without me needing to push them quite as much. And honestly, I feel like it's really important that kids understand the logic behind things. It's not just about the rules, it's about the teaching them how to think through any consequences. I want my kids to feel empowered to make their own decisions, not just to follow rules blindly. And it's not always easy. Sometimes when I'm tired or I'm stressed out, it's really tempting to resort to the because I said so phrase. But I find that when I take a few extra seconds to explain something, it makes the whole situation more respectful and more thoughtful. Okay, number 5. I let my kids fight it out. I actually do. I let them fight it out. Every parent deals with those sibling fights, and most people's instincts is to jump in immediately, separating kids, assigning blame and trying to control the situation. But me, I actually don't step in right away. And before anyone gasps, I'm not talking about letting my kids go full-blown wrestling match. I don't sit back in the living room and have a cup of tea whilst they're arguing. But when it comes to minor arguments, disagreements, a little shoving, I actually don't rush to break it up. Why? Because it's a conflict resolution skill. I want my kids to learn how to handle their own disagreements on their own and how to argue their point, how to compromise, how to express any frustrations in a way that hopefully doesn't involve screaming in each other's faces. And if I constantly jump in and referee every single disagreement, how are they ever going to learn that skill? If someone always swoops in to fix kids, they never really figure out how to work through any problems themselves, and that's not doing them any favours in the long run. So think about it. As adults, we don't always have someone stepping in to solve our conflicts for us, and you can't go running to the manager every single time a co-worker annoys you. I mean, you can, but it's not going to help you to grow. You have to figure out how to communicate, how to stand your ground, and sometimes even how to let things go. And I want my kids to develop that whilst they're young, so that they don't end up being parents and adults who crumble the moment that someone disagrees with them. I don't let it get out of hand. I have to say I have my limits, and if things genuinely become dangerous or cruel, I will step in. There's a huge difference between a normal sibling squabble and something that crosses the line. Physical harm, never okay. Bullying or being intentionally mean or hurting each other, absolutely not. But if it's arguing over a toy or who gets the bigger piece of cake, whether someone looked at them the wrong way, I immediately step away. Let them crack on. Sometimes they work it out within minutes, other times we have to work it through together, and that's okay, because the point it's not to avoid all conflict, it's just about letting them go through it. I'm not letting them get away with fighting, it's just about teaching real life. I know plenty of people believe that good parents should break up the fight immediately. I just don't agree with that. I see my role as a guide, not a judge. I don't want to be the one who's always deciding who's right, who's wrong. I want them to figure that out themselves. And honestly, since taking this approach, I've noticed that they actually argue less over time because they know that I'm not going to rush in and fix everything for them. So they start handling things differently from the start. They find solutions, they negotiate, they let small things go, and at the end of the day, my goal isn't to raise kids who never fight, it's to raise kids who know how to handle conflict in a really healthy way. And sometimes I think that that means letting them figure it out, even when it gets messy. Okay, next up is no strict screen time bans. And I know that screen time is a hot topic in the parenting world, and I totally get why some people feel strongly about banning screens altogether. But here's the thing, I don't believe in a strict screen time ban in our house. Instead, we've adopted more of a balanced approach to screen time. First off, I'm all for making sure that my kids don't spend all day glued to screens, but I also think that it's super important to recognise that technology isn't inherently bad. I think that it can be really educational and could even bring families together. For example, we love to watch shows or movies together as a family, and my kids enjoy educational games and apps that help them to learn in fun ways. And the key is to be mindful and purposeful. So instead of saying no screens ever, we just set clear boundaries around when and how screens can be used. And it's not about making screens a forbidden thing or about teaching balance. We don't have a rule where we use screens during meal times or we don't, and we also try to keep screens limited in the evening so that it doesn't interfere with sleep. On weekends, we have a little bit more flexibility, but we still make sure that they have plenty of time for other activities like reading or playing outdoors, crafting, whatever. The idea here is to model a really healthy relationship with technology. And I don't want my kids to see screens as this forbidden fruit, because I know that when something is off limits, it can make it more appealing. Instead, we talk about the why behind our screen time rules, and we're transparent about what's okay and what's not. But here's the kicker. Screen time, it actually isn't the enemy, for me anyway. I'm trying to create a world where screens are a good thing, but we're understanding when and how to use them in a way that doesn't really interfere with our real life connections. And I think we do ourselves and our kids a disservice if we don't let them experience technology. I want my kids to have amazing thinking skills around technology and understand with it that there is a time to step away and to engage with the real world around them. So ultimately, we have a balanced view of screens. They can be a tool for learning creativity and family bonding, but they should always be used mindfully and not taking the place of any enriching experiences. All right, let's talk about number 7, which is forcing hugs and kisses. I know that this is one that gets some raised eyebrows, and I get why. It's often seen as just a cute, innocent thing to ask our kids to hug or kiss a relative or a friend, but here's the thing. I don't force my kids to do it. No matter how much I love them or how much somebody thinks it's expected, my children get to decide when and how they will show affection. And this might seem a little bit surprising to some, but for me, it's about teaching my kids boundaries and consent from a young age. When I was younger, I remember being asked to give hugs and kisses to people, and whilst I loved them, I never really had a say in when or how I showed affection. And I want to make sure that my kids understand that their bodies are theirs and they get to decide what happens to it. It's not about not loving our relatives or being rude, it's about giving them the autonomy to decide when and how they want to show affection. Sometimes my kids will offer a hug or a kiss freely when they feel like it, and there's other times where they don't feel like it, and that's okay. It's really important to respect them and their emotions and let them feel safe in choosing how they're going to express their love. I also want them to understand that just because someone asks for affection, they don't have to give it if they're not comfortable. It teaches them that comfort matters, and showing emotions and affection should be something that they're ready to do, not something that they're forced to give into. That kind of like give grandma a hug or kiss your auntie goodbye. We don't do that. We just trust our children to decide when it feels right for them, and we like to respect their boundaries. Okay, number 8. I don't force my kids to share. Yeah, you heard it right. I don't force my kids to share. I know. To some that probably sounds awful, but we've all been conditioned to believe that sharing is caring and that kids should automatically hand over their toys the second another child wants them. Here's the thing, I don't actually believe in forced sharing. So instead, I teach my kids about ownership, boundaries, and generosity on their own terms. Why should kids give up something just because someone else wants them? Imagine this, right? You're sat in a coffee shop working on your laptop and a stranger walks up and says, "Hi, I'd like to use that. Can you give it to me now?" Would you just hand your laptop over? That's your laptop, you're using it. And yet we expect toddlers to do the exact same with their toys. And I don't want my kids to feel obligated to give up something that they're playing with just because another child is demanding it. I want them to learn that it's okay to have boundaries, and just because someone wants something doesn't mean that they're automatically entitled to it. So teaching generosity without forcing it is something that I try to prioritise. It doesn't mean that I'm raising selfish, greedy little dragons. Quite the opposite. I teach my kids to be generous in ways that they're not feeling pressured into. Instead of saying you have to share, I encourage phrases like, "You can have it when I'm done," or "Let's take turns," or maybe even, "I'm not ready to share right now, but you can have this instead." This way, they're learning that generosity is a choice and it's not an obligation. And guess what? Kids aren't constantly forced to share. They're more likely to do it naturally, because I feel like it feels good when it's their decision. And boundaries are just as important as kindness. I think a lot of parents push sharing so hard because they want to raise really really well-mannered kids. But my kids still have the most amazing manners, and they're super happy and they are considerate, they're respectful, and I want my kids to grow up knowing that it is okay to say no, and that you don't have to give up something that is feeling really important to you just because somebody else says that they want it. I don't want them to think that. Okay, let's dive in to early academic pressure. This is a big one, especially in a society that often values academic achievements at such a young age. But here's where I stand. I don't push traditional learning in the early years. For us, play-based learning is the foundation of early education, and I truly believe that this is the best approach for my kids. Don't get me wrong, I want my kids to learn and to grow, and I believe in letting them do so in a natural, organic way. When they're really little, I don't focus on things like writing or maths in a really set way. Instead, we focus on exploration, creativity, problem thinking, critical thinking, all of those kind of things through play. Play is how children learn best. It allows them to explore the world around them. They develop their social skills, even building the cognitive skills that they need for later academic success, but without all the pressures of traditional learning. So, for example, if I'm building a block tower, I'm teaching maths concepts like spatial awareness, balance, structure. I might be playing pretend games, helping with social development and emotional understanding. And I truly believe that pressure to learn early can actually backfire. Kids can end up feeling burnt out, frustrated, or even develop negative feelings towards learning if they are pushed too hard, especially too early. So if you rush into formal academics, I like to instead give them the freedom to find out their own questions or, explore their own curiosities. I know that there are people who will want their children reading as soon as possible, but it's just not a top priority for me. We focus on creating a fun environment, engaging and totally natural, and I do think that the academics will come in their own time. All of my children are on track or above age related, so that is what has really worked for our family. Okay, and finally, number 10, we do not do the one-size-fits-all approach to children. I know you've probably heard the phrase, "You should do this because it works for everyone," or "This is the way to parent, no exceptions." And whilst I think that there is some great advice out there, I don't believe that there's a single perfect way to parent all children. I'm a huge believer in parenting each child individually based on their unique personality, their needs, their circumstances. Each of my 4 kids are different. They all have different temperaments, interests, different ways of approaching the world, and because of that, I've learned to parent them in a way that feels right for them, even when it goes against the grain of what's considered typical or traditional. For example, my 11-year-old might need more independence and a different set of rules to my 3-year-old, and that is totally okay. And I think too often we get bogged down by the generic advice, whether it's from parenting books or social media or even family members who have their own ideas of what is best. In the end, we know our kids best, and it's up to us to figure out what works best for our family. Some of the things that I have done with my kids might seem unorthodox, but you might not have read it in a parenting book, but I found that's what's worked best for us, and the key is being flexible and willing to adapt to each child's unique needs rather than rigidly following a huge set of rules and advice that just don't work for us. And that's okay. I trust myself and I trust my instincts as a parent. Okay, there you have it. Those are just a few of the parenting rules that I live by that might be a little bit controversial or maybe even unpopular with some people, but they work for us. Parenting is such a personal journey, and whilst what works for one family might not work for another, I do truly believe that doing what feels right for your kids is always the best approach. If you're a parent, I'd love to hear from you. Do any of these points resonate with you? Do you think that you would do anything a little bit differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love to hear from you guys, and it's an open space for us to all share, learn and grow together. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. I upload a lot, as you can see. We do vlogs, cleaning, decluttering and lots of sit down motherhood chat, and you can join me over on my Instagram or on my TikTok for more behind the scene peeks into my life. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Keep being the amazing parent you are. Take care and much love.